It's hard not to notice that the war on birds is ramping up. Late last year there were egg shortages in the United Kingdom, and then just last month the egg shortages suddenly hit New Zealand. This coincides with increasingly obvious globalist agendas that aim to remove poultry and eggs from our diets. As I discussed in my video, Should You Eat Bugs?, Guardian columnist George Monbiot claimed in July 2022 that eating meat, milk and eggs is an indulgence we cannot afford. Trying to make people feel guilty about consuming these things under the farcical climate catastrophe narrative is one of their strategies. However, there has been another narrative that has been building in the background for the past 2 decades, and it has been used as the excuse to cull hundreds of millions of birds, the so-called avian flu. Let's have a look at the ignored paper that blew apart the entire narrative in 2005 by exposing the scientific fraud that the whole story is built upon. We called Chapter 7 of Virus Mania, Avian Flu and Not a Glimmer of Proof, and opened with the following paragraph. According to media reports in 2005, the world was threatened by a pandemic, triggered by a mutation of an avian flu virus with the mysterious and ominous-sounding name H5N1. In the weekly newspaper, Die Zeit, in late summer 2005, we shuddered to read the front page headline, Death on Silent Wings. The bird flu is approaching, and as if the point was to create the title for the sequel to the Hollywood shocker Outbreak, in which actor Dustin Hoffman is on the hunt for a deadly virus, H5N1 plays Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, impending attack of the killer ducks. Der Spiegel quoted David Nabarro, named the UN Chief Coordinator in the battle against avian flu in September 2005. A new flu pandemic can break out at any moment, and it can kill up to 150 million people. Reinhard Kurth, then director of Berlin's Robert Koch Institute, didn't want to be outdone by Nabarro, and in an interview with the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, he warned that an epidemic potentially threatens all 6 billion people. These were preposterous claims, even for people who think that pathogenic viruses exist. Nothing of the sort eventuated, of course, but like other scamdemics such as swine flu and SARS-1, it was building up to the greatest fraud of all, COVID-19. None of these required the existence of an actual virus. They simply relied on marketing campaigns, whether it came from big pharma, mainstream media, or government-funded institutions. During the COVID era, the virus gaslighting has been in full swing, with the plot lines including Chinese bat caves, Wuhan wet markets, lab leaks, gain of function, and most recently, Project Veritas helping promote the term directed evolution. These are all variations of an overriding theme, that viruses are everywhere, poised to spring out and attack people and animals at any moment. In 2005, the avian flu narrative didn't gain much traction, but after the apparent success of the COVID-19 fraud, a bird flu rerun is now in pre-production. In fact, the early advertising started around October 2021, when people were immersed in the COVID-19 show. But now the wider media are running stories about avian flu, designed to ramp up the fear once again. For example, this headline appeared on the Edinburgh Live platform on the 2nd of February, Avian flu spreading to mammals, but what does that mean about the risk to humans? They reported that the avian influenza, also known as bird flu, has now mutated into a virus that infects animals other than birds. Now public health bosses have issued a warning that this mutation could even jump to humans, reports Glasgow Live. Although it is portraying this as a news story, you'll notice that it is essentially a reboot of the 2005 news stories that we mentioned in Virus Mania. You can watch my video, Secrets of Influenza, to see why there is no scientific evidence that influenza is a contagious illness, let alone one that is caused by an imagined virus. And with regard to the so-called avian flu, perhaps the most damning paper exposing the anti-science was published by David Crowe and Torsten Egelbrecht in Medical Hypothesis in December 2005. They documented the 4 questions they put to the Frederick Loeffler Institute and the information they received in response. Question 1. Does H5N1 exist? The FLI claimed that the H5N1 Asia virus can be produced completely in vitro by using reverse genetics. However, Crow and Engelbrecht pointed out that the supplied paper did not detail how the claimed original, quote, stock virus was determined. Robert Webster, one of the paper's authors, responded that stock viruses are classified as select agents, and we are not at liberty to release this information. In other words, he knew he had been caught without evidence of a virus in their stock. Otherwise, why not divulge this crucial piece of information? Anyway, we know from the dozens of similar papers we have analysed that they simply have mixed tissue samples. At no stage do they demonstrate an infectious particle, let alone show a methodology that determines specific genetic sequences that come from the claimed particle. Question 2. Is it pathogenic to animals? The FLI provided 3 papers which it claimed demonstrated pathogenicity. None of the methodologies in any of these papers were sufficient to show the existence of a replication-competent intracellular parasite. They simply asserted that their manufactured brews contain such particles. And as is always the case, no virus particles could be found in any of the animals. But even allowing for this, all were performed in an unscientific manner, as we can see. The first study involved delivering a highly concentrated embryonated chicken egg culture into 4-week-old ducks, including directly injecting the material into their lungs. Some of the ducks subsequently died, including a few of the ducks cohabitating the cages. They claimed the imagined virus was responsible, but it was not performed in a blinded fashion and there were no control experiments. In other words, it was a senseless activity, exposing them to mixed biological samples which didn't follow the scientific method. The second study involved Madden Derby canine kidney tissue cultures that were injected up the noses of mice, knocked out first with a general anaesthetic. As we have come to expect, they were not normal mice, but highly inbred BALBC mice. While this procedure killed a few mice, once again there was not a control experiment in sight, and thus no demonstration of an independent variable. The third study used the claimed reverse genetic reassortant viruses, the problem with which Crow and Engelbrecht had pointed out being that the paper's co-author was unwilling to disclose how he had established his original stock contained a virus. He just expected us to believe that it did, as well as the claim that the selected genetic sequences were viral. In any case, the derived brew was injected intravenously into 6-week-old chicks to see if it would make them sick. This is obviously not a natural exposure route, and it was further disqualified from the scientific method by once again not including any control experiments. Question 3. Is it transmissible and pathogenic to humans, and does it have pandemic potential? For this, I can simply quote Crow and Engelbrecht, who stated, "The emerging infectious diseases paper is an anecdotal report of a 6-year-old boy from Thailand with severe multi-organ disease. No evidence was given for transmissibility to humans. The scientists found evidence of aspergillosis, and the boy was treated with toxic agents, broad-spectrum antimicrobial and antivirals, before he died." Subvarao et al., referenced by the EID paper, describes a previously healthy 3-year-old Hong Kong boy who developed flu-like symptoms in May 9, 1997 and was treated with broad-spectrum antibiotics and salicylic acid, though this is commonly contraindicated. He developed Ray's syndrome and died 11 days later. In other words, the most likely explanation is that he was killed by a reaction to aspirin. Question 4. Have other causes for observed disease been studied? As stated by Crow and Engelbrecht, neither the Subvarao et al. Study nor the FLI references consider reasonable competing theories for disease causation, e.g. environmental and pharmaceutical factors. The conclusion: our analysis shows the papers do not satisfy our 4 basic questions. It should be more than evident that if these claimed pivotal avian flu studies do not follow the scientific method and are based on methodologies that are insufficient to demonstrate the existence of viruses, then the claim of a viral avian flu should be rejected outright. There does not need to be debates about how to manage an entity that does not exist. We can see, however, that the confusion is poured on when the Edinburgh Live article goes on to state that the BBC have released figures that show the virus has led to the death of 208 million birds worldwide, with at least 200 recorded cases in mammals. First of all, their reference for this is another news article titled East Lothian Bird Flu Fears is up to 40 dead gannets washed up on beaches. The story continued. Although no tests have confirmed the latest incident was caused by avian influenza, Scottish ecologist and wildlife photographer Peter Stronach has been sharing photos and videos of sick or dead birds exhibiting symptoms of the avian disease on Twitter. As we pointed out in Virus Mania, this kind of nonsense was being promulgated 2 decades ago. Find some sick or dead birds and blame it on avian flu. Sometimes they, quote, test some of the birds for the imagined virus, and of course, if even one result is positive, then they consider their investigations to be conclusive. This adds another layer of confusion when it is believed that these tests have any form of diagnostic validity. The kits come in various forms, whether they are antigen assays, antibody assays, or PCR protocols. As we have detailed in many videos and articles analysing these kits with regard to other alleged viral illnesses, none of them require the existence of viruses. They all involve circular reasoning with the fallacy that the selected proteins and sequences are viral in nature, therefore detecting them means there is a virus. So when they make claims such as the sensitivity is over 95% and the specificity is over 95%, this refers only to analytical parameters. In other words, its ability to detect the particular sequences or proteins selected by the operator, rather than non-specific targets. But detecting proteins or sequences is a chemical reaction that is not the same as diagnosing a, quote, virus or infection. A quick search did find a recent article by the BBC making the claim about the 208 million dead birds. However, further through the article, it states that almost 15 million domestic birds, including poultry, have died from the disease, and more than 193 million more have been culled. So even on their own terms, the vast majority of the dead birds were actually chickens that were intentionally killed. Mike Adams reported on this in December last year, noting that millions of chickens and turkeys were being culled in North America and other regions. As he stated, more than 40 million egg-laying chickens have died in the current outbreak, according to USDA data. Importantly, it doesn't say they died from avian influenza. They died from being culled. Stated another way, the reason why so many birds are dead during an outbreak is because farmers are being ordered by health authorities to kill them. Now, while I disagree with the analysis that a pathogen exists at all, for the reasons that I've outlined, I agree with Mike's conclusion that it is a cover story to achieve depopulation of food-producing chickens, worsening food scarcity and food inflation at the same time. And if you are wondering how they kill birds in these astronomical numbers, it is often done by ventilation shutdowns, in which the air supply is cut off from the birds. The temperature of the building is raised, carbon dioxide may be pumped in, and the animals gradually overheat and suffocate. In the larger facilities, it is reported that disposing of the bodies may take weeks. I am not a supporter of factory-farmed chickens, but this kind of activity slumps to all new lows. Mike also hits the nail on the head, noting that after more than a decade, his backyard chickens are unvaccinated and free-range, and they aren't dying from avian influenza. In Virus Mania, we also document why you don't need an imagined virus to make factory-farmed chickens sick, because there are numerous reasons, including heavy psychological stress resulting from extremely close crowding in the cages and mass stabling with no natural sunlight. Denatured industrial feed, including already spoiled feed. distortion of animal bodies as a result of overbreeding for certain desired physical characteristics, preventative administration of all sorts of medications, antibiotics, vaccines, etc., that may induce severe side effects even to chicks. Additionally, flocks of birds can be found dead in the wild from a variety of causes, often because of ingesting toxins. However, whenever sick or dead birds are found in farms or in the wild today, the virus hunters apply their bogus test kits and, based on the detection of certain proteins or genetic sequences, claim that a virus is at work. The solution is then declared to be the mass slaughter of all birds in the area or facility, which is how they report their ludicrous, quote, case numbers. Most of these birds are of course completely well. It is as senseless as the incineration of over 1 million cows, which took place in the UK in the 1990s for alleged mad cow disease, another false epidemic based on pseudoscientific claims. We dedicated another chapter of Virus Mania to exposing how prions have never been shown to be the cause of disease, and how Stanley Prusner's speculative prion model was awarded with a Nobel Prize in 1997, right around the time the cattle slaughter was in full swing. It is likely that we will see a ramping up of the bird flu narrative in 2023, and this article on the BBC platform in early February contains the expected fear. Claims that this photo of a dead gannet can only be explained by a deadly virus, that it is killing hundreds of millions of birds, that it is jumping species, that it is leading to egg shortages, and the punchline: the World Health Organization says the further spread of the H5N1 virus will have to be monitored closely to see whether it is mutating into a form which can spread amongst humans. So, what can we do aside from ignore the nonsense? If possible, people should get their own chickens. Our family will be taking the Mike Adams approach and securing our own homegrown eggs and poultry. And while this is not practical for everyone, those who don't have their own chickens could look to support their local organic suppliers. It would not be a surprise to see attempts to ban homegrown chickens in the future, but this will be much more difficult if it becomes a more widespread activity. The story will be sold as the birds being biohazards, harbouring viruses that could trigger a pandemic at any moment. In the meantime, it is much more difficult for them to control the food supplies if we take steps to be more self-sufficient and work in decentralised systems. The avian flu will be used as another excuse for imposing this sinister biosecurity surveillance state. That is why exposing the non-existence of pathogenic viruses is so important. All of these fake narratives will come crashing down, whether they involve alleged human or animal contagion. Those taking part in mass culling, the mass distribution of vaccines and pharmaceuticals, and other, quote, public health rituals are the real plague. They are destroying food supplies, desecrating the earth, and creating an epidemic of fear. The best thing we can do is move away from their madness and bring our deserved prosperity back to this beautiful kingdom. If you enjoyed this video, please visit support.dsam.com